Hello, this video is going to introduce you to the problems of mind-brain identity theory. There are three key problems of mind-brain identity theory. And just before we do that, it's important to just briefly remind you what mind-brain identity theory is if you've just dropped into this video, for example. So mind-brain identity theory is the claim that our experiences, for example, my current experience of seeing myself in a camera, or your experience now of seeing me on the television or on the screen, or seeing a flower or feeling pain, those experiences are identical with brain processes, right? So the experience, the qualitative phenomenological experience, what it's like to see yellow, is identical with something happening up here in your head, okay? Now, it's an important claim because it's not obviously true. It could well be true, but it's not obviously true, so we need to think what reasons there are for justifying that. And if you want to know what that is, you have to look at in my previous video. But these three objections are really interesting and they're really important because they kind of take us deep down into philosophy and how philosophy works alongside science and how they influence each other. And that will become clear as I go through the video. So the first problem I want to look at is a problem developed by Hilary Putnam in one of his works, Psychological Predicates. Hilary Putnam points to a really obvious claim, which is something like that I can feel pain, but we know for a fact, we're almost certain, that animals feel pain. I can think that the sky is blue, and I know for a fact that other animals could at least sense that and perhaps have that thought as well. And we don't have to stop with animals. We can imagine, and it's very plausible, that there are alien species in somewhere in the universe that don't have brains, or if they do have brains, they're made from very different stuff than our brains, and that they can have thoughts like, should we travel to other planets? Snow is white, or the universe is big. Now, the fact is that these same mental states, if you like, these same sensations are had by different brains and different kinds of brains. If that's the case, and we could literally just stick to the animal kingdom here, we've got a problem. Because if my sensation of yellow is identical with something happening up here in my head, then the dog sensation of yellow is identical with something happening in its head, but it has a different brain with different brain processes, different chemical composition, and so on and so forth. So this is the issue of multiple realizability. Multiple realizability means that you can realize the sensation of yellow as a dog or as a person. You could think that the universe is big as a human being or as an alien, right? So how can we make sense of this claim that these two things are identical? But one way that the type identity theorists can respond is to say, well, there's such a thing called dog pain, and there's such a thing as human pain, and there's such a thing as human beings thinking the galaxy is large, and there's such a thing as aliens thinking that the galaxy is large, for example. And so, therefore, there's no problem, right? Well, that doesn't really solve the issue, because we can respond to that by saying, well, hold on a minute. When an alien thinks that the universe or the galaxy is large, they're thinking the same thought as I'm thinking. When an alien sees the colour yellow in the same way that I do, which is perfectly plausible that they have that same experience, the qualitative experience, so to speak, they're having the same experience. There's something essential to the experience of yellow. There's an essence to it. It's perfectly plausible that they're having the same inner experience, but different physiological realisation of it. So that really doesn't solve the multiple realisability problem. And so the only way that might be solvable by some is to say something like there's a mixing identity theory of functionalism, but we're not there yet for that, okay? So that's the first serious problem for mind-brain identity theory. The second problem of mind-brain identity theory is an old argument of Descartes. And the argument, if you remember from substance dualism, is the claim that the mind is not divisible, but the brain is, as a physical substance, divisible. Okay, they can't be the same thing. Now, we know that that is a problematic argument, because to say that, you begin by assuming the very thing you want to prove, which is that they're different things, right? So if I say the mind isn't divisible and the brain is, I'm assuming the thing I want to prove, which is that they're separate. The other thing that the physicalist can say in response to that is there are physical properties which aren't divisible anyway. So, for example, that a room is at 35 degrees centigrade, or that my brain weighs 50 grams, that property is not divisible. So just the claim that material things, all physical things are divisible, is patently false anyway, so we can reject that criticism. The third objection to mind-brain identity theory is known as the location problem. I want to make it very simple and then go into the depths of it. The first issue really is this, that if I'm in pain or if I'm having a thought, that kind of thing doesn't seem to have a location, right? A brain process does have a location. It's a part of it. It's in my head, so to speak. It's happening in a certain place. But my thought that snow is white, or my feeling of pain, although I might feel my pain in my leg or whatever, that doesn't have a location. Now, one response that can be given against this is that this is just a linguistic convention. Although it's true that in a sense, my thought that snow is white can't have location, that doesn't mean that it doesn't. It just seems that it doesn't. Our community, our linguistic community, doesn't go around speaking of my thought that snow is white being in a certain part of my head. And that's just why we think intuitively it makes no sense to make such a claim. But in reality, science leads us to understand that, in fact, it does have a location. That certain things, sensations in my head are located. Gilbert Ryle would have responded to this by saying, no, this isn't just a linguistic convention, it's a categorical mistake or a category error to claim that there's an identity between a thought that snow is white and a location. These are just totally different things and they can't play a role in the same logical game, right? So it's not just a linguistic convention. It's actually a philosophical fact that these things can't be identical. I think the mind-brain identity theorists can respond to that and say, well, we develop our categories from our scientific understanding. And if our scientific understanding leads us to discover that certain pains or sensations or thoughts have a place in the brain, even though it's really strange to think that my sensation of yellow is 2 inches away from my thought that snow is white, which is kind of what would be true if mind-brain identity theory was the case, it doesn't mean it isn't the case that that's going on. Wittgenstein used to say to his students famously, why did people think the sun went round the earth? Why did people think that the sun went round the earth? And his students used to say, because it looks that way. And then Wittgenstein would say, well, what does it look like for things to be the other way around, i.e. for the earth to go around the sun? And the answer is it looks that way. So the point of that Wittgenstein story is to say, just because something appears to be a certain way and it's very, very intuitive to you and it's very deeply built into your language, doesn't mean that it's true. Our deepest intuitions about life or metaphysics or whatever it might be are not marks of truth. We have to let the science, in some sense, show us the deep truths.